Look at this beautiful jersey I acquired the other day on the secondhand store here in Sweden. Look at the team. That team, Boston Red Sox, is only one of 2 teams that have not moved stadiums. Let's take a look at why they haven't.
Here's a map of every current MLB ballpark. Over half were built during this millennium, and nearly 80% have been open since the early 1990s. Major League Baseball turns over its stadiums faster than you might expect.
Really?
And yet, on this entire map, only 2 have been standing for more than a century. For all of the
Is there any specific reason baseball field changes a lot?
tradition baseball has, ballpark design hasn't stood still. Early 20th century jewel box parks gave way to sprawling multi-purpose stadiums, and they were replaced by retro-inspired ballparks that were built to recapture
I love retro. Oh, look at this. This is the one I've been to here.
baseball's historic charm. Each new era was a step forward from the last, and with every shift, older parks were cleared away to make room for something better.
Damn.
However, there are 2 exceptions. Boston's Fenway Park and Chicago's Wrigley Field are the most well-known ballparks in all of baseball. Both have their quirks, but what makes them special is how they've survived for so long. They're still preserving the essence of America's pastime. But while they've held strong, most others haven't. Entire franchises have cycled through 2,
Oh, wait. Look at that.
sometimes even 3 stadiums in the time these
3. Okay, so take a look at that. So all of this is probably fairly recent, it looks like, because, I mean, the upwards picture here still looks pretty colorful.
entire franchise
Oh, we saw that in New York, the Mets. Sorry, I'm talking. We saw the outside of the Mets Stadium. It looked really new, and it got me thinking. Now I know it's new.
franchises have cycled through 2, sometimes even 3 stadiums in the time these parks have remained in place. So why did modernization skip over the Red Sox and the Cubs? Why did the churn stop here? The answer begins with America's obsession with convenience. Let me quickly explain why. The early 20th century witnessed baseball's golden age of urban parks. They were tightly wedged directly into city neighborhoods, so you had places like Forbes Field, Shibe Park, and Ebbets Field surrounded by a boatload of development. Because of this urban design, fans were able to arrive either by streetcar or on foot. But, as we all know, most of these are now gone, and that's because priorities began to change. In the mid-20th century, America's growth in suburbanization led to cars becoming a focal point of travel. So cities planned accordingly. Instead of building neighborhoods
Suburbanization, that word, I guess. So America wasn't big in suburbs before.
with embedded ballparks, teams moved into multi-purpose concrete bowls. These were circular, symmetrical, and were often surrounded by parking lots as far as the eye can see in order to accommodate the influx of automobiles. And with football beginning to compete with baseball in popularity, these massive stadiums conveniently hosted both NFL and MLB games.
Oh!
It was a perfect scenario for cities across the continent. Not only could local and state governments kill 2 birds with 1 stone, but these buildings were also easier to finance early on. And since they were massively accessible by car, this stadium blueprint became a hot commodity across the country. But in chasing convenience, something was lost. The character of these stadiums became defined by bland old uniformity. It was all too cookie cutter. So within just a few decades, even these modern stadiums began to feel outdated. Then the 90s rolled in, and once again, everything changed. But first, let's talk about another significant change. As much as I
Okay, we're going through a sponsor here, I think, but that's very interesting. Is this common knowledge in US? So you had the same arenas before. I can only speak about the Baltimore, Philadelphia stadiums I went to, where the football and baseball team, the arenas were so close, just a few meters apart, but not the same stadium anymore.
love making these videos, balancing Mapify along with my... As leagues grew wealthier in the late 20th century, the limitations of sharing a stadium became really hard to ignore. Baseball and football, of course, aren't built for the same experience. Football favors vast sightlines and evenly laid out grandstands, while baseball leans into imperfect angles, intimacy, and quirks. The playing surfaces differ, the field dimensions differ, and of course, there's the obvious headache of scheduling with there being 2 major tenants sharing a building. So as revenues continued to climb, franchises began demanding facilities tailored specifically to their sport. And the first domino to fall was in Baltimore.
Oh, that's cool.
In 1992, Oriole Park at Camden Yards opened. You had brick facades replacing raw concrete, unique dimensions returned in the outfield, And the ballpark was moved closer to downtown. This made the build-up to ball games much more walkable. Fans obviously loved this approach, but it wasn't simply for nostalgic purposes.
Oh, I'm sorry I have to interrupt, but it's true. There were so many people walking to that stadium. I just smiled because I've been there. It's so cool. But that's true. It was so walkable.
Fans obviously loved this approach, but it wasn't simply for nostalgic purposes. Camden Yards blended these aesthetics with effective revenue streams as well, all while the Orioles had more say over the operations. It was a concept that just made a ton of sense, and it created a new blueprint across MLB. In the following years, a retro ballpark boom swept through the US and continued well into the 2000s. It officially marked a third distinct era of baseball stadium design, and it all occurred in less than a century. Yet, while this was all going on, there were two ballparks that hardly changed. This is Fenway Park, home to the Boston Red Sox.
Wow.
It opened in 1912 on a tight, irregular plot in Boston's Fenway Kenmore neighborhood, which ensured its outfield walls were shaped by the surrounding streets and buildings. This gave rise to one of baseball's most recognizable features, the 37-foot green monster in left field.
Oh,
Throw in Pesky's
that's where it is.
pole, the triangle, obstructed views, and the green walls wrapping around the ballpark. Fenway's imperfections are exactly what make it so beloved.
Ortiz into deep right field. We'll see you later tonight.
2 years after Fenway was built, Wrigley Field opened on Chicago's north side. Originally built for another baseball league, it evolved into the longtime home of the Cubs, framed by brick walls draped in ivy and littered with residential rooftops that became involved in the viewing experience. Over time, the neighborhood around it became just as recognizable as the ballpark itself. What began as a stadium on Chicago's north side eventually grew into Wrigleyville, a neighborhood shaped by the Cubs with bars and storefronts that come alive whenever there's a game.
Nice. I love that.
Number 62.
Oh, wait. What happened? Did he shoot it out of the arena and people went out to chase it?
Everyone knows that Fenway and Wrigley are timeless survivors from baseball's early era of ballparks. But it wasn't long ago that they weren't alone. Comiskey Park in Chicago's South Side, Yankee Stadium in New York, and Detroit's Tiger Stadium were all notable for preserving their history longer than others. This is because multi-purpose stadiums were especially attractive to cities with newer franchises or those aggressively pursuing NFL expansion during football's rise. But in older, established baseball markets, specifically dense northeastern and midwestern cities, the political urgency to abandon existing urban stadiums just wasn't as strong. But then the 90s arrived, along with the fancy new retro-style stadiums. And since they were basically a newly constructed imitation of the jewel box design but with a modern twist, that combination proved fatal for several ballparks that had initially survived the multi-purpose wave. Comiskey Park was replaced in 91 with a new facility across the street. Tiger Stadium closed in 99 and gave way to a new downtown ballpark. And even Yankee Stadium, perhaps the most iconic ballpark in baseball, it was demolished and replaced in 2009 in order to unlock better ways to generate revenue. These ballparks were historic, but without full replacement, it became increasingly difficult for them to keep up with the league's changing economics thanks to the new wave of modern retro-style stadiums. That being said, of all the ballparks that have come and gone, let me know in the comment section below which one's your favorite. There's probably going to be a wide variety.
Yeah, what's your favorite?
Anyways, this brings us back to Boston and Chicago. If the retro boom was sweeping away even the most historic venues, why didn't it claim Fenway and Wrigley too? Well, in
That's
truth,
what I want to know.
it almost did. By the late 1990s, Fenway Park was no longer considered untouchable. In 99, the Red Sox publicly unveiled plans for a new Fenway Park, which was a modern replica of the original to be built just across the street. It would preserve the aesthetics of 1912, but include what baseball's financial model now demanded by incorporating more regular and premium seating. But the proposal ultimately stalled. Financing questions, along with public skepticism and ownership maneuvering, heavily complicated the plan.
Yes.
The franchise was eventually sold to a new ownership group led by John.
I know these guys. They are Liverpool Football Club owners as well. Especially, I know this face.
Henry, the team's current owner, before a replacement could materialize. So they pivoted away from the idea altogether. Meanwhile, the Cubs faced a similar scenario but in a couple separate instances. Wrigley had long resisted modernization, so much so that lights for night games didn't arrive until 1988 following decades of pushback. During that fight,
Cubs did they play in the dark before?
Leadership floated suburban alternatives as leverage, including sites in Arlington Heights and Schaumburg. That playbook resurfaced again in the 2010s. As newer parks around the league generated more and more money, Wrigley's limitations became more apparent. When Tom Ricketts proposed a sweeping renovation package that included outfield video boards and expanded signage, he made it clear that without new revenue streams, moving out of Wrigley would have to be considered.
No.
But this strategy in Chicago, along with the idea of a full-blown replacement in Boston, never acted as a clean solution for either franchise. Unlike the other jewel box ballparks that were replaced outright, Fenway and Wrigley chose a different path.
Wow, it's
The
very
other
interesting to just look at them side to side
jewel
like
box
this.
ballparks that were replaced
Wow.
outright, Fenway and Wrigley chose a different path. They committed to rebuilding within their original walls. Following the Red Sox sale in 2001, Fenway entered a long incremental modernization phase. Its new ownership invested in structural reinforcements, added premium seating atop of the Green Monster, enhanced its concourses, improved player facilities, and reconfigured seating, all while keeping its famous footprint intact. And in Chicago, Wrigley followed a similar trajectory with the $575 million 1060 project that began in 2014. The renovation saw an overhaul of clubhouses, it improved the century-old structure, it brought in new hospitality areas, and it integrated spaces like patios and restaurants. Again, without abandoning the original site. The surrounding neighborhood was even incorporated into the broader redevelopment strategy. And once these ballparks proved they could compete financially within their historic shells, the argument for demolition weakened dramatically. Replacement only makes sense when a building can no longer compete. But by the 2010s, both parks had demonstrated that they still could. And this only cemented their longevity for good.
Huh. Wow. What a great video.
By the time both ballparks had been modernized, another layer of protection quietly settled in. Fenway was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 2012,
yes.
while Wrigley was designated a National Historic Landmark shortly thereafter. These labels don't make demolition 100% impossible, and they don't freeze a building in time. But they do raise the stakes. Achieving historic designation introduces formal oversight. It also increases public scrutiny by giving people something to point to. And perhaps most importantly, it reframes the conversation to the ballparks becoming a cultural asset. This means that from here on out, tearing down either or becomes a major political calculation. In high-density neighborhoods that are deeply intertwined with the stadium's presence, the cost of demolition suddenly begins to outweigh the cost of renovation. The easier option becomes working within the existing structure rather than starting over altogether. The truth is that most early 20th century ballparks didn't disappear out of neglect. They were moved on from because the environment around them changed. The car era demanded space, the multi-purpose era demanded flexibility, and the modern era demanded, well, modern sustainable revenues.
Yeah.
Many parks couldn't adapt quickly enough to meet those demands, so it was simply far easier to replace than to retrofit. Fenway and Wrigley survived because they were embedded in places that couldn't be casually cleared away. They survived because, when the reset moment of the 1990s arrived, their quirks suddenly became assets instead of liabilities. And fast forward to today, their grandfathered in nature within America's pastime allows these franchises to stand out among the rest. That includes their key identifiers like the Ivy Wall and Green Monster. They are one of the many examples of how ballparks differentiate themselves between others across the league. This is also done by having unique outfield wall dimensions. They act as a sort of fingerprint among the baseball world. It adds to the character that comes with the game and also how it's played.
Wow.
If these outfield wall designs mean anything to you, you should check out the outfield wall t-shirt lineup on Mapify.com. There are 2 colors for every team, and each item in the store comes with free shipping, no matter where you are in the world. Plus, you can get 10% off.
Well, great video. I must say I thoroughly enjoyed that. Let's see if we can move back here. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought I would get more, it would be like a more hype video, but this was very like a great learning experience. I've got so much respect for the Chicago and the Boston arena now, because I remember starting this YouTube, you guys told me that they are so beautiful and so great that I couldn't really see it. Now I get it. Definitely get it more. Thank you guys for watching. Take care and see you soon.